You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
The light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer, and the voice of the bridegroom and bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. They had a little of a worse problem than Tyre, but it's the same picture. We're seeing a picture of Tyre, and then we're seeing a picture at the end of the age of another city similar that was destroyed.
In today's message, Pastor Ken visits the book of Revelation and makes comparisons to the city of Babylon that has yet to come and the nation of Tyre. In the book of Ezekiel, the nation of Tyre was one of a few nations who plotted against God and suffered their inevitable defeat. But Pastor Ken dissects the comparisons the two cities will have. And just like the destruction of Tyre, the city of Babylon will suffer the same defeat at the hands of our mighty God. God will judge the city of Babylon and all of its inhabitants. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 27, as he continues his message on the good ship Tyre.
Javan, Tubal, and Meshach, those are three communities, three countries. They trade in slaves and they trade in bronze. Of course, they're trading in bronze. That's how you keep the slaves enslaved. It was a name given to the Greeks by the Hebrews and believed to be the country that was settled by Javan's posterity. So Javan is probably Greece. They were slave traders. Again, this is a problem also in Revelation 18. And it's interesting when you start trying to figure out what the city of Babylon is in Revelation 18, you start looking at what countries today still engage in slave trade. Saudi Arabia and several other Muslim nations do. It's part of their thing. It's okay for them, they think, to enslave non-Muslims, so they engage in it. Javan here does that, and it's Ionians. They are on the coast of Lydia and Caria, so we know they're on the Peloponnesian Peninsula pretty well. So again, looking at that map, you would see that Javan it's in the islands of Greece. It looks like it could be Turkey too. It's in that same general vicinity. And then we're talking about as well Tubal and Meshach. So Tubal is actually in the hills of Turkey, and Meshach, if we start looking for that, that's actually in the middle, right in the middle of Turkey. In fact, it's located to the northern portion of it. So Tubal and Meshach, which are the Tabuli and Mushki of the Assyrian monuments. So if you're looking and reading monuments that the Assyrians left, they call them the Tabali or Tabili or the Mushki. And some people have mistranslated the Mushki to think that they're in Moscow. They're not. They're in Turkey, okay? It's not those guys. Their territory originally extended far to the south in the time of Sargon and Sennacherib. By the way, Sennacherib's the guy whose castle they just discovered underneath the mosque that ISIS blew up. So there you have the guy's name too. And so we know he really lived. The territory of the Tabali adjoined Cilicia, while the Mushki inhabited the highlands. So they're in Turkey. They have contact with the Hittites. They're trading with the Hittites. But in later days, the Meshach may have gone further north and were actually on the Black Sea. So now all of a sudden they may be pushing towards Ukraine, but we don't know how far north they went, but we do know they were on the Black Sea and in that general area. Beth Togarmah are horse traders. They trade horses, war horses, mules. They're located in eastern Turkey and Armenia, and they're descended from Gomer. It's a mountain region south of the Caucasus that's celebrated for horses, and even during the Russian Revolution, that's where many of the horses came from, was from the Caucasus region. And unfortunately, when I started taking Russian, I learned it with a wrong accent and have been accused of being from that region if I speak in Russian, because I have the wrong accent, I guess. I don't know. I've been told that. Dedan we've identified is north of Saudi Arabia. And when we took a look at the map several weeks ago as you travel south, east of the Jordan River, south of the Dead Sea, Dedan is the first major trading center in Saudi Arabia. And it's still it's still in that general vicinity today. It's still a major trading center. There's a bunch of people who live out in the middle of the desert, and that's what they do. But it could be the island of Rhodes, too. We're not real positive. Again, you can't be real dogmatic. Aram is Syria. That's simple. It is Syria. Dedan it's mentioned, there's three places that this could be. It's midway between Mecca and Medina. It's in Saudi Arabia, okay? That's where we think it is. But it's probably the same Dedan that was the scene of Muhammad's first campaign. But we're not real positive about that, but we do know it's in Saudi Arabia. Sheba, well, and people who travel there, they exported goods from Uzal to Tyre. It was a port, and it may have been a port there at one time, but there was sand that filled up a lot of these ports, and they disappeared. Babylon was a port at one time, and if you were to see where it is on the map today compared to the Persian Gulf, you'd wonder, why would you go 40 miles inland to a port? It used to be on the Gulf. The sand gets deposited, and everything keeps moving around. So Dedan could have been a port. It's not anymore. Sheba and Ramah is probably Yemen. So you're moving even further south. That's the area, the Queen of Sheba, we're thinking Yemen. We're thinking that entire area. And the final grouping of cities that are listed here, which are the cities of Sheba, Ramah, Haran, Cana, Eden, Sheba, Ashur, Kilmed, different Sheba. There's a lot of towns named Sheba. They're actually to the north and the east of Tyre, along the Fertile Crescent. In other words, on the trail that these guys would travel. They wouldn't come across the desert. They'd follow where it was green or mountainous. And it's towards Assyria and the Euphrates River. So where do you want to know these places are today? It's pretty much wherever ISIS hangs out. That's where they're at. So you begin to see why some of these communities and these countries and these cities show up again in Ezekiel 38, and why there's some interest in what's going on is because there's still problem areas today. It hasn't changed a whole lot. But again, Tyre is an international trading capital. It would be the same as trying to describe all the countries that trade with New York, or going down to the port of Miami and trying to figure out where all the vessels of registry have come from over the course of the last 2 weeks, or going to the Panama Canal Zone and just keeping track of all the vessels going through. It'd be the same thing. You'd be seeing all these vessels from all over the world. So they're a trading capital, obviously. But the agenda that Ezekiel has here, that under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is to highlight the power and magnificence of Tyre and describe the geographical scope of their commercial ventures, but he also catalogs all the goods as well. And again, most of them are luxury goods. There are a few common, like wheat, but most of it is a luxury good. Even Mineth wheat is a special kind of wheat that was a luxury item. It would be considered a luxury for folks to use. So the ship Tyre is filled to the brim with all of this luxury stuff, and they have political power because they have money, and everybody comes to them. Sounds again like certain trading communities that we have around the world today. The cities that have the power are the ones that have all these vessels passing through it. So this is why the prophet is involved with this. They have a pride problem. They have connections to the entire known world at this time, to include India, that we think, as well as South Africa, as well as the west coast of Africa. They've been going all over, including probably Spain and Britain, and some conjecture about South America. But there is another city that we see in the Bible that is also the focus of world trade. And it's in the book of Revelation, chapter 18. We'll get to that. We'll take a look at it. But I'm just trying to keep that in your mind, that this is not the only trading community that the scriptures have bad news for. There's another one in Revelation that there's bad news for as well. Verse 26 of chapter 27. Your rowers have brought you into great waters. See, so he's talking about those 50 rowers that's on every vessel, and they have these different shifts. The east wind. Now, that's not a good term to be using. Every time you see the term east wind used in the scriptures, it begins to be talking about judgment. The east wind usually is a wind of judgment. The east wind has broken you in the heart of the seas. There you go. It's a sign that judgment is beginning to fall on them. Your wealth, your wares, your merchandise, your sailors and your pilots, your repairers of seams, your dealers in merchandise, and all your men of war who are in you, with all your company that is in your midst, will fall into the heart of the seas on the day of your overthrow. Remember we talked about last week when Alexander the Great conquered Tyre. He killed 10,000 people who were in that community outright. The rest he made slaves because they were hiding out in one of the pagan temples there. And it was culturally wrong to kill someone who was hiding out in the temple. You could make them a slave. But if they weren't in the temple, you could kill them and throw them in the ocean. They did. Exactly what it says here. On the day of your overthrow, they'll be thrown into the sea. And they were. Will fall into the heart of the sea on the day of your overthrow. At the sound of the cry of your pilots, the pasture lands will shake. All who handle the oar, the sailors and all the pilots of the sea will come down from their ships. They will stand on the land, and they'll make their voice heard over you and will cry bitterly. Sailors are coming back to Tyre after being gone for 6 months, 8 months. They're gone. It's not there anymore. Alexander conquered them. It's a bare rock. There's no city there anymore. Can you imagine what that would be like? Having your ship row into what used to be a busy harbor, and now it's just a rock, and there's nothing there? Because that's what Alexander left. He left nothing. He left a rock. They will cast dust on their heads. They will wallow in ashes. Also, they will make themselves bald for you and gird themselves with sackcloth. They will weep for you in bitterness of soul with bitter mourning. They were the source of money, and now that money's gone. They were the source of trade. There's no more trade. They've got a ship loaded with goods. They can't trade it with anybody. Nobody wants that anymore. And they're sure not going to go to Egypt because this was a safe place. It was a safe place to trade. They can't do it anymore. And they will weep for you in bitterness of soul with bitter mourning. Moreover, in their wailing, they'll take up a lamentation for you and lament over you. Who is like Tyre, like her who is silent in the midst of the sea? When your wares went out from the seas, you satisfied many peoples with the abundance of your wealth and your merchandise. You enriched the kings of the earth. Now that you're broken by the seas in the depths of the waters, your merchandise and all your company have fallen in the midst of you. All the inhabitants of the coastlands are appalled at you, and their kings are horribly afraid. They are troubled in countenance. The merchants among the peoples hiss at you. You've become terrified, and you'll cease to be forever. Again, imagine these ships coming back, and when they went out, they would be gone for up to a year, year and a half. They come back, there's nothing there but a rock. You've got a shipload of goods. You heard rumors as you were getting closer, but you had no idea, and now you don't know what to do with all these goods. You've got a bunch of sailors that need to get paid. They want to see their families. Their families are gone. They don't know what to do. And so they're trying to sell to other kings, and other kings aren't interested. The trade is gone. It's just disappeared. It's dried up. So you can kind of see what's going on. Verse 26, again, we saw that hint of judgment, the east wind. But literally what happened is their rowers rowed them into a hurricane, and they got destroyed. Now, about that other city that we talked about in Revelation 18, that's called Babylon. So if we were to go to Revelation 18 and take a look starting in verse 1, we're going to see another city that's referenced, and you're going to be amazed at how some of the terms are the same. Yet this is a modern city, and people are trying to identify it. It's supposed to have 7 hills. And when you start looking at major communities in the world that are trading centers, you see some cities that have 7 hills, and there's one group right now that are saying, oh, it's Mecca. Well, Mecca's not a trading city. It could be Rome. Well, Rome has 7 hills, and it's a trading center. There are some who also say it's New York. I'm still looking for the hills. Anyway, there are others who believe it could be the real Babylon rebuilt. And by the way, a guy by the name of, he used to be the ruler of Iraq until he found him in a hole and they killed him. He was actually rebuilding Babylon. And for several years, the United States Marine Corps actually had a base in Babylon until they realized that the equipment was destroying the relics, and so they had to move out of town. Anyway, this is in Revelation chapter 18, starting in verse 1. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. So we're in the tribulation period. We're towards the end of the tribulation. And the earth was illumined with his glory, and he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She's become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. So when we return to planet Earth with Jesus Christ, and we rule and reign with him during the millennial period, we'll know where that is. We'll be able to go and we'll see that it is a dwelling place of unclean birds, and it'll be there as an exhibit for God's power as how he judged this community. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. Some of this sounds familiar. Didn't we read some of this about Tyre last week and this week? Same picture. I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you'll not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquity. So God's calling the believers out of this community during the tribulation period. So there are some believers who are around at that point, and God's saying, Leave, get out. Pay her back even as she is paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds in the cup which she has mixed. Mix twice as much for her to the degree that she glorified herself. Now, what was Tyre doing? Glorifying themselves. They were perfect, right? What do we see Babylon doing? This community of traitors, whatever city it is. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow. Pride. Same issue. And we'll never see mourning. It sounds like Tyre. For this reason, in one day, her plagues will come. The Lord's was very specific with Tyre. And we saw what the language was about Tyre that Ezekiel gives us, and it happened literally as he said. It became a rock. It was a place for drying of nets. So in Revelation, we have the same picture being driven home about a trading community that exists on planet Earth someplace today, more than likely, that's going to be destroyed. But it's going to be destroyed very quickly. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she'll be burned up with fire. For the Lord God who judges her is strong, and the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment. So if you were wanting to see what was going on in this community and you see something that's happened there, why would you stand at a distance and not enter? Is it because of the mushroom cloud that's over the community? Could be. Or the multiple mushroom clouds over the community? They're going to stand at a distance and they'll go, well, that's bad, but they're not going to get close. In Tyre, they actually pulled into the harbor and saw that everything was gone. But now it's a different story. They'll see the smoke of her burning, stand at a distance of the fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. That's a literal 1 hour, by the way. And what can destroy a city in 1 hour? Nuclear weapons. Yeah. So, that's what we're seeing here. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Same story as with Tyre. And now listen to what the cargoes are that are being shipped here. They sound very familiar. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and ships and cargoes of horses and chariots, and slaves and human lives. The fruit you long for has gone from her, and all the things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. The merchants of these things, who became rich from her, will stand at a distance, again because of the fear of their torment, weeping and mourning. Again, why are they standing at a distance? Probably because it's radioactive. What else can destroy a city in an hour? But did you notice all the goods that were being traded are the same goods that we see in Ezekiel? So you see a picture of Tyre, and you can say, what happened to Tyre happened. And we can actually take it to the bank that what John is talking about in Revelation 18 is going to happen as well. There's no doubt. We have a picture of it having happened to Tyre. It's going to happen to this town called Babylon. Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste. Again, what can destroy a community in 1 hour? A bomb. Every shipmaster, every passenger and sailor, and as many as make their living by the sea stood at a distance, there it is again, at a distance, and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads. They did that in Ezekiel. And were crying out and weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth. For 1 hour she's been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. Then a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and not be found any longer. And the sound of harpists and musicians and flute players and trumpeters will not be heard in you any longer, and no craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer, and the sound of a mill will not be heard in you any longer. The light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer, and the voice of the bridegroom and bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. They had a little of a worse problem than Tyre, but it's the same picture. We're seeing a picture of Tyre, and then we're seeing a picture at the end of the age of another city similar that was destroyed. In Ezekiel 26:16, what happened to the folks who found out about Tyre? It says, the princes of the sea will go down from their thrones, remove their robes, and strip off their embroidered garments. They will clothe themselves with trembling. They'll sit on the ground, tremble every moment, and be appalled at you. Does that sound familiar to what we saw in Revelation 18? Sounds almost the same. Now, we still have one more chapter of judgment on Tyre. But this is a different, chapter 28 is a different chapter, because we start off talking about Tyre, and then we start talking about the throne behind the power of the throne. So we're actually going to start talking about Tyre, and we're going to wind up talking about Satan, because Satan's addressed. The king's acting like Satan, and finally the attention turns to Satan. We're going to be talking about that next week. And there are a lot of places we're going to wind up going. So to be ready for it, you might want to familiarize yourself with Genesis 3, where we have the fall of man. That's where that takes place. We're going to see that same guy, the Nakash, who is wandering around Eden. There's going to be references to him. Genesis 6, where we talk about the fall of man, as well as the destruction of the planet through the flood. Isaiah 14 is the other reference that we have in the prophets about this same guy. There he starts off talking about Babylon, and then he winds up talking about the same guy that we find in Ezekiel 28. So it'll be an interesting chapter. One of the guys that I read and am studying for this, he calls this the money chapter. If you're into the interesting stuff about Tyre, it's the one where there's a lot more going on. We'll be bringing in also some of the aspects of Psalm 82 and what we see also in Genesis chapter 11 in this chapter as well. A lot of stuff going on in that chapter. I don't know if we can cover it in just 1 week. It may take 2, but we'll do the best we can.
We're so glad you tuned into today's edition of The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken. For more information about this ministry and what we believe, you can find all you need to know at theunsafebible.com. Want to hear more messages from Ezekiel? We've got that too. Just look under the Media tab. Again, our website is theunsafebible.com. As you've been listening to this teaching in Ezekiel, what are some of the things that come to mind? Do you struggle with unresolved sins in your life? Have you found yourself wondering why your life isn't going as planned? Can you imagine what it would be like to be exiled from paradise and to be told it was all your fault? That's the truth that Ezekiel had to deliver to the Jews from Babylon. It took 70 years, but they finally accepted their sin as their own and returned in faith to God. Where are you on that journey? No matter what the circumstances are, you must seek God in all things to ensure a singular focus on the one true God. We want you to find strength in your faith. And if you need help or have questions, you can contact us directly at theunsafebible.com. Just click on the Connect tab and the Connect card. Fill it out and we'll get in touch with you. If you're in the Jupiter, Florida area, we want to invite you to our next worship service. Directions can be found on the About tab by clicking the word Contact. We hope to see you soon. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we want to invite you back again next for more encouraging and uplifting messages by Pastor Ken, right here on the Unsafe Bible.